Welcome to Still Evolving, where we explore the truth behind lasting performance and resilience. Rather than relying on perfection or superhuman ability, our conversation will highlight how real strength emerges through simple, intentional habits grounded in self-compassion, adaptability, and the ability to grow through life's inevitable setbacks. Today's guest is Joel Onyshuk. Joel is a 3-time VP of sales with almost 2 decades of sales experience. The bulk of his career has been spent working with mid-market and enterprise food and beverage manufacturing companies to implement bleeding-edge technology to improve efficiency and profitability and fuel growth. He's an avid student of leadership, and his leadership influences include Brene Brown and Simon Sinek, among many others. His passion for manufacturing and leadership have led him to launch the Frontline Industry Podcast, which is nearing 100 episodes, bringing you insights and stories from inspirational leaders to give you the tools and knowledge needed to lead effectively at every level of your organization. Joel spends his spare time with his kids and continues his pursuit of becoming a top 1% pickleball player in 2026, and has recently built a speakeasy room in his house to create a neighborhood hub for connection in his community. Please welcome Joel to Still Evolving. Joel, hi, welcome to Still Evolving. Grateful to have you on.
Thanks, Dr. Amy. Good to see you.
So catch our audience up. Share us a little bit about who Joel is, your journey, where you came from, even what you're working on now.
Yeah, 20 years of sales experience. Never thought this would be what I'm doing for a living. If you saw my talents and my background, you'd think I was going to be a classical pianist in an orchestra somewhere, or a psychologist helping some marriage and family couples solve their problems. But somehow those were not the plans that ultimately panned out. And so I got into sales as a means to put myself through school, and started in, door-to-door kind of Cutco, not knife selling, and car sales and retail sales and professional sports team sales or ticket sales, and then ended up breaking my way into software as a service, and that the rest was history until recently in the last year ended up getting into robots as a service of all things. And so that's an interesting world to be in now, and one I'm sure happy to talk about as well. So this is my third VP of sales stint now here at a company called Formic, Formic, and we're the leader in the robots as a service industry.
Super cool. Talk about evolving, right? Like just
Yeah.
as a service. Wow. So along that journey, like all of us, I'm sure you took your punches to the gut or at least hit some headwind along the way. I'm just curious, when you faced adversity and challenge in your journey, what has helped you evolve, continue to grow, and then capitalize on the opportunities ahead, either for you, yourself as a leader, or even your team?
I think that one of the hardest skills to develop is that of resilience. To be able to withstand the headwinds, to withstand the punches, and to be able to rise above them consistently. It's not hard to find a lot of salespeople and sales leaders and leaders in general burning out very quickly, or at least over time. And to see the work and effort they've put in ultimately end in them going, I can't do this anymore. And I think for me, it's been effective for me to keep my eyes focused on the bigger prize, that my purpose in this life isn't this job. My purpose in this life isn't the revenue I bring in quarter to quarter, year to year. It's far bigger than that. And there are many ways to look at purpose, but if I think about it in the way that I think my grandmother said it, and my mom said it, and now I say it to my own kids, is leave others better than you found them. And can I consistently show up for my customers, for my team, or the leadership team in our company, to my neighborhood, to my kids, in such a way that I leave others better than I found them? And that could look a variety of different ways. It could mean investing in them very deep, meaningful level. It could be just creating a positive experience and a smile for the barista at Starbucks when I pick up my order, instead of being a grump, showing up and showing a smile and calling them by name, and reversing what they're supposed to do for me, and that is make them feel welcome, make them feel appreciated. And so I think that overarching philosophy has done well to keep me focused and motivated, because no matter how hard it gets, if I see my purpose as an overarching thing that defines me beyond the circumstances in the moment, in leaving others better than I found them, I think that's been powerful for me in developing the resilience and motivation.
I love that. Just first off, I very much can relate and share in that purpose. It's evolved and tweaked slightly over my life, but I guess the verbiage that I've often used is whatever space I walk into, leaving it healthier than which I found it. So personally, absolutely on. I think the other piece of that is that threads then whatever way you show up. If you're showing up in corporate leadership, if you're showing up with your kids, if you're showing up in Starbucks, that is the grounding element, right? And some of these other outcomes, like what's the revenue gen for this year, those are like very external. And I think it also sets you up for the use of other mindset tools or perspectives that enables you to see so much of those outcomes and these different roles in our lives are out of our control, right? So it can be very grounding in that I can still show up regardless of all this noise or all of these, the headwinds that are shifting. I mean, it snowed in Virginia Beach last night. So, like crazy things that you don't expect or perhaps are just lower odds when they do happen, it enables you to kind of have a stable ability to respond and show up in those roles. You mentioned your grandmother, you mentioned your mother, you mentioned your performing arts background, and even now, like with your leadership team, I'm curious if you can share back the power that has come from the connections that you have. You talked about the connection to a higher purpose, but also with others, with people. How have they helped you? Have you had coaching, mentors, colleagues along the way to help you in your resilient path?
I have. I had my closest mentor pass away years ago, and that was hard for me. And it's something that I continue to seek is kind of that replacement figure. There's been a lot of people in my life who have filled in gaps, right? Mentor in this area, a bit of a mentor in this area, but not that overarching person to go to and just dump my stuff on and be weak and be vulnerable and not feel like I have to have it all together holistically,
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest things I learned in life is how much of a mess we all are, really. We're all just trying to keep it together. And one of the things I was telling one of my peers recently, one of the VPs in our company, was that we're all either about to go through something or we are going through something. And so that awareness of everyone's challenges and life stuff that crops up is a way that I think is meaningful in embracing the need to give people grace and love people well around you. But back to your question, I think for me, there have been those individuals along the way that have made a difference in different key areas of my life. And I think, there are former leaders, one of the business leaders and owners of a company I worked for years ago was probably one of my biggest sales mentors of all time. I would credit him with 60% of what I've learned along the way because he was just a master at his trade. He was excellent at what he did. And I think in large part, it played a role in my development even today. The things I train my own team on are things I learned in large part from him and that experience. But then, of course, there's the informal leaders as well, the leaders that will never know that you view them as a mentor. And I think of Brene Brown, I think of Simon Sinek, I think of folks like that who, whether it's their media content online or their books, have been meaningful in my development to create the version of myself that I am today, which is still in progress, but I think is meaningfully better than it was even 5 years ago.
Super cool. I think you highlight like the power that comes from many different relationships, right? And my heart goes to you in hearing about the passing of your mentor, the one that you've had so long. And there are some, it's hard thinking about someone else filling those shoes, like and stepping
Yeah, it
into,
is.
Nonetheless, it sounds like you've also still connected and drawn strength and perspective, maybe challenge support from others who may feel more one directional, like you're receiving something from them, like the leaders that you mentioned, or just the really relatable sharing yourself with other colleagues. Like, yeah, we're all going through something, or will be, level setting that. You mentioned in your journey, like this is a grind, right? So what do you do to fuel it? What role does recovery have in your perhaps daily routine, weekly routine? How do you fuel the evolving journey?
I think there are a few key areas that have been critical for me to embrace and pursue when it comes to my refueling and creating that space to recover. I think I would break them down into competitive elements outside of work, things to keep me motivated and competing and energized. There would be the relational component of community and ensuring that I surround myself with healthy relationships. And frankly, that's been a harder one as my life has gotten busier and my career has continued to evolve. The things I have to do on a daily level seem to be more demanding than ever on my time. But then I think it's the spiritual aspect as well, remaining grounded in relationship with God and in my, again, purpose in life and reminding myself that I'm here for others, not for myself. And how do I leave others better than I found them? And so if you look at those three areas, on the competitive side, I picked up pickleball 3 years ago. And I know a lot of people pick up pickleball, but for me, it's an elite level of play now that I've gotten myself to. So I seek out some really strong competitive places to play. I actually drive an hour both directions to play at a club quite a ways away from me, as you might imagine. And so that's somewhere I go 2-3 times a week to get
Okay.
my competitive edge kind of realized in that realm instead of just at work. And that's been good for the second part of relationships, right? And those relationships that have grown. Some of the people I see the most are those people. I moved to Florida in 2020 and moved from Minnesota. And so some of the closest friendships there, I still try to maintain and text and call and hang out with when I can. And then I actually have been relationally, this is another good example. I moved a year ago, and I've been rebuilding a kind of a bar hangout spot in my house, where I intend to make it kind of a neighborhood watering hole, if you will, to
Okay.
open it up, one Friday night from 7 to 9 p.m. a month, and just have people show up whenever they want, drinks on me, build community, build relationships, get to know your neighbor, maybe create some deeper connections than could have existed elsewhere. And so I think those are all pretty important for me
Yeah.
in being healthy and whole. And then, of course, there's the personal development and getting counseling, which we all should do with therapy,
Yeah.
even if we don't feel like we do need to.
I love it. Just the role, to start with pickleball, first off, you can look at that as play. You can look at it as workout, all of the above. And then the connections that are coming from teammates or competitors or just the league, right, that you're playing at. Uh, I was talking earlier today with someone. When we talk about recovery or what fuels us along the way, the key is like figuring out what works for you, right? An example of that, some people will talk about like the role of gratitude or the role of journaling or the role, right? And people are like, I hate journaling. I hate journaling. Not everybody's going to gravitate to playing pickleball, but like, where can you find a place of movement and connection?
Hmm.
Right? That's impactful in that way. And honestly, I would share the home remodel build for your neighborhood watering hole similarly. It's how do we create these spaces where we can just deliberately put the damn phone down and just be real and enjoy each other's company and sharing and support. So super cool. I love it. I love the idea of the watering hole. I'm keeping that in mind actually as I think of summer projects. Hey, you mentioned kind of your own leadership development. How would you describe your like leadership identity, or even if you want to riff further, like what is your perspective or mindset for that serving now as a vice president?
I think, if you're going to boil it down to a leadership philosophy, which I think is probably a bit too narrow, but I think servant leadership to me is a major deal. I think leading from the front, not asking others to do things that you're not willing to do yourself, setting good examples, demonstrating the character, the vulnerability, the authenticity, the transparency from the front, and setting that tone so others are free to follow
Mm-hmm.
authentically, I think is really important. And I tell my team all the time when I'm afraid, when I'm unsure, when I'm confused or uncertain. The things that, I think a lot of people, a lot of leaders feel like they need to button up and act like they have it all together and posture as if because of my title, I have it all figured out and you should just trust me and follow me because I've kind of earned my stripes and that's why I'm your leader. I don't view it that way. I think people on my team are far more talented than I am in a variety of areas. And it's not my job to be better than them at anything. It's my job to assemble a good team, identify the way where we need to go and put the right team together to accomplish that. And I'm just one cog in that overall machine. I happen to have the title that at the end of the day is my word that ultimately wins in the world that I'm in, but it's not without consulting that team and leaning heavily on them. And so I think servant leadership for me is really key. And I mentioned Brene Brown earlier. I think I mentioned Simon Sinek earlier. I think if you were to smush those two into one person and then throw a little bit of Joel special sauce on it, you'd find that would be a very accurate depiction of what it's like to work with me and for me.
Super cool. Love it. I guess I think back on how even those identities and how we lead evolve, right? And I appreciate you sharing the dynamic capacity in which we're all working in. Humans like information. We like predictable patterns, right? And right now, for many people, it feels incredibly disruptive. I was talking to another person earlier today where they feel like it's almost like these constant mini crisis moments that were like strung together. And as leaders, we're trying to like figure it out. We were even talking before we started about like, hey, the end of the year, it's in sales, like everything is push, right? When you model and you do so consistently, that servant leadership, and as you described it, like if you put the Brene and Simon together with a splash of Joel, and when you model that consistently, you are more likely to kind of transfer that learning to others where that they can too be vulnerable, ask for what they need, come together with the ego at the door, looking at how we can all perform together towards this goal. So tremendously powerful, even in these what feel very dynamic, fast-paced change. So before we jump, I do want to pick your brain before we wrap about the robotics space.
To add one thing, and that is, I try to set the tone very early on, even in interviews, because I'm constantly interviewing and my team's going to double or triple next year. And so meeting a lot of faces and setting the tone up front of like what you can expect when it comes to working with me. I'll say a few key phrases and I'll share them with you now and for your listeners. Maybe they'll be beneficial for them. But these, I think, set the tone for what I want our team culture to be like. And I'll say this: my job is to make you look good. I will never throw you under the bus. I will never take credit for your ideas. If things are going well, you get the credit. If things are going badly, I'll take the blame. As far as I can, it is my job to make you look good and to create the opportunity for you to be the best version of yourself while you're here. And it's not to keep you here. If your desire is to do some things that evolve beyond who we are as a company here, the positions I have to offer you, the sort of role you want to embrace, it's my job to help you leave and find that. And I'll even put in a recommendation for you for those places. But I want you to look back and know that these 1, 2, 3, 5 years that we'll work together, because it won't be forever, are the best years you ever had because it made you become ultimately the leader that you want to be when you leave this place. And if we accomplish that, I've done my job and you've done yours. And of course, we want to sell some robots along the way.
I love it. Tell us about the robots. I'm so curious about them.
Yeah, it's funny. When our kids were little, they'd ask, Daddy, what do you do for work? And I always had to figure out a way to say some software as a service job in 3-year-old language, 5-year-old language. And now it's very easy. Daddy sells robots. And that's fun for them to say to their friends and things. But I'm in a robotics and automation world in food, beverage, CPG, pet food, chemical kind of manufacturing. We help put boxes inside of larger boxes and put those boxes on top of other boxes and stack them up and ship them. And so if there's a human job that is hard to fill because people don't like lifting heavy things for 8-10 hours a day, we're trying to fill that with a robotics solution that enables manufacturers to address the labor shortage that they have, help create more resilience in their own business, help them evolve in their own business. Because frankly, we're getting our butts kicked by China and other countries when it comes to automation and investments in there. And the U.S. needs to catch up. And what makes us unique at Formic is that we do all this as a service. So there's no capital. We do all the maintenance. They use our OpEx budget to fund it. It's basically the easy button to get into automation in a way that eliminates all the risk that's usually associated with embracing that sort of technology. So it's a pretty fun, bleeding edge way to address the human shortage in the world when it comes to manufacturing jobs and to address the risk when it comes to investing in automation.
Super cool, Joel. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, we always leave our audience with kind of that immediate actionable takeaway. What's the one thing you've talked about a good number, from recovery to relationships, certainly your own growth pursuits in terms of you're building your self-awareness and your own skills. But is there an immediate actionable takeaway that also you'd like to leave your audience with, a tool that you find on a daily basis just really helps you in being able to show up in your moments that matter and sustain that over time?
Yeah. Well, I think the easy button for me would be to go back to the conversation we had around a higher purpose in life, because I think that keeps you motivated and focused. But I'll say this: I've had the privilege in my own podcast to interview, almost 100 episodes of having conversations like this with leaders and executives in a variety of businesses. One of the common themes I see over and over again is you see leaders get to their 50s, 60s, and beyond, and they're looking to invest in other people. They're looking to now pass on the wisdom and experience they've learned to become those mentors that we were talking about earlier for younger folks in their career. We don't have to wait to do that. We can do that now. And all the money and title and notoriety in the world, we can go after that now and then look back when we're 50, 60, 70 years old and go, okay, now I can start investing in other people, when really that's the most meaningful thing you'll do all along. Or we can do it now and save ourselves 10, 15, 20 years and develop even more impact in this world before we leave it. And so that's what I would encourage others to do is recognize that you don't have to wait until later. You can invest in people now, and the legacy that you'll leave behind in doing that will be far greater as a result.
Absolutely love it, Joel. Thank you so much. And I challenge all of us Where can we turn around and give back and invest and lift those others up in our world? So thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.